Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's community consultation meeting um, for the planning application at 1837 to 1845 Bayview Avenue, which proposes to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a 25-story mixed-use building. My name is Jason Z. I'm the sign planner to the review of this application and the host for tonight's meeting. So welcome. If you haven't already done so, please go to the registration page and just to download instructions for voice and Q&A chat functions for tonight's question and answers town hall. Next slide, please. Um, I just want to advise everyone that this presentation is being recorded right now. So please be aware that that this meeting is being recorded. All and personal information such as your opinions, statements, and voice will become part of the public record. Under Section 27 of the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, records created for the general public do not restrict access and may be made available on the city planning website. However, your registration info will not be disclosed as part of the public record. Next slide, please. So I'd like to begin by honoring the land that we are on. Takaranto, now known as Toronto, is under Treaty 13 and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. It is the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation or generations past. So I'd like to also acknowledge those that came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Next slide, please. So tonight's agenda, we're going to start with introductions, followed by opening remarks from Councillor Robinson. Then staff, myself, we will be giving a presentation, followed by the applicants team. At around 7:15, 7:10, we will transition into a live questions and answers town hall, where you can ask your questions, make comments, and it's an open discussion town hall. And then we will close with remarks from the counselor. We're aiming to end at 8:30, but I suspect if we have many questions, we can certainly go over to accommodate those questions. Next slide, please. So for tonight, we have a number of panelists for this meeting. From Ward 15 Councillor's Office, we have Councillor Jay Robinson. We have Parker Samuels from her office. For city staff, from community planning, we have David Sitt, the director, Shelley Cham, the manager. My name is Jason Z, I'm the planner, and we have Paul Procopio, system planner, who's helping with the Q&A and the presentation. From urban design, we have Michael Sakalaskis. From transportation services, we have Homoyun Harafarush. And from urban forestry, we have Ander Vandermeet. From the applicants team, we have the developer, Bayview Broadway Development Inc. Their planning consultant, Goldberg Group. Their architect, IBI Group. Urban design firm, acronym TO. And their transportation consultant, BA Group. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an overview of where we are in terms of the process for this application. So this application was received and circulated in November 2021. It was deemed complete in December 17th of 2021. City staff then forwarded a preliminary report to the February 2022 North York Community Council, and that report was adopted. Subsequently, the applicant appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, or the OLT, on March 21st, 2022. And those were on the grounds that council had not made a decision within 90 days of the application being deemed complete by staff. So staff, subsequent to that, staff have provided a number of technical comments arising from the initial circulation. And so where we are right now is we are holding a community consultation meeting as directed for by council, from community council, to hear from you, the community. Um, I will say though that although this meeting is a great venue to hear from your fellow residents and community members, and to hear from staff and the applicant and the counselor, comments and questions can always be directed to myself and city staff or the counselor's office at any time during the process. Um, and I will, as part of this presentation, I will discuss next steps for this application and where do we go from here after this tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. So city planning is responsible for evaluating and making recommendations, and upon which these get forwarded to community council and city council, and city council is the decision maker from a municipal perspective, or municipal level, I should say. Um, and how staff comes to make those recommendations and do their review of the application is, we try to determine the public interests, and those are comprised of four components. The first being the details of the application and the surrounding context. Second being applicable planning policies and documents. Third is comments from stakeholders, different agencies, and just as importantly, the public, you. And fourth, laws and decisions established by council and other decision-making bodies, including the OLT. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to go over the planning framework, how planning works in the city of Toronto. So land development and growth. Paul, I think we're seeing the notes here. If you want to just maximize that, thank you. Sorry about that. Uh, Land development and growth in the city is regulated by this framework. So at the top, it's a hierarchy. We have planning policies and the planning policies of the province of Ontario. So the province sets out high level planning policies and directives, which include the Planning Act and the provincial policy statement, and also the provincial growth plan. Moving a layer down, we have municipal planning policy, which implements provincial policies in a Toronto context. So this is done in the form of policy documents, namely the official plan and secondary plans. And then going another layer or level down, we have the zoning bylaws, which translate the city's official plan policies and secondary plan policies into more finer grained details. And these are by way of the performance standards. And lastly, we have documents uh, that provide further guidance on the official plan policies, how to implement those, and those are known as design guidelines. Next slide, please. So in the growth plan, the province has set out policies for the areas around transit stations, and these are known as major transit station areas, or MTSAs for short. And the province has defined MTSAs as an area generally within 500 to 800 meters of a transit station, or about 10-minute walk, roughly. But the province itself has directed the city to actually nail down the actual exact boundaries of each MTSA, and has directed municipalities to determine that boundary, then report back to the province for approval of that exact boundary. Also, for each particular MTSA, the province has set out minimum density targets for residents and jobs on a hectare basis per hectare, and these density targets per hectare, they vary based on the station type. So, for instance, for subways, the province expects 200 people and jobs per hectare, and for LRT stations, province expects a lower density target of 160 people and jobs per hectare. The growth plan also states that that these are minimum density targets, and it does encourage municipalities to go beyond these targets where appropriate and where they don't conflict with other provincial policy. Next slide, please. So, going from MTSAs, there is a subset of MTSAs, or a subgroup of MTSAs known as Protected Major Transit Station Areas, or PMTSAs for short. So these PMTSAs, the purpose of those are, in the Planning Act. Planning Act only allows for inclusionary zoning policies to be enacted within areas that are known within areas designated as PMTSAs. So what inclusionary zoning really does is it requires new residential developments to include affordable housing units to create mixed income housing. So PMTSAs are a tool to accomplish this particular policy, inclusionary zoning. The province has also said that PMTSAs must map out how individual buildings and developments across parcels of land within the PMTSA area will what the minimum densities are, and these are to demonstrate how to achieve those minimum density targets that I was referring to before. Um, and for city council adopted amendments to the official plan and the zoning bylaw to implement inclusionary zoning. I should say, however, the inclusionary zoning policies don't apply to this specific application, as this application was filed before um, the transition policies within the inclusionary zoning bylaws that were passed by council. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk about the current status on MTSAs and PMTSAs right so far. So there has been about 130 draft PMTSAs and MTSA delineations. That is to say, draft mapping of the boundaries to the Planning and Housing Committee, and they've sent those to the Planning and Housing Committee for consultation. Leaside Station area is one of those draft delineated PMTSAs with its minimum density set out. As you can see in this map here, you can see the various densities and various gradations of gray. So those represent different densities within the Leaside PMTSA area. And like I said before, the categorization of these different densities is to ultimately ultimately meant to achieve the minimum 200 jobs and residents per hectare as mandated by the province in the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. So the final report for MTSAs and PMTSAs is due to go to a Planning and Housing Committee in July the 5th, and we're looking for staff that are working on MTSAs and PMTSAs are looking for public input to help inform changes to these draft delineations. Um, so that is to say that the mapping of each of these PMTSAs and MTSAs is still in draft mode, so they're not finalized yet, and we're looking for input from the public. Next slide, please. Some other key updates for MTSAs and PMTSAs. So there across the city there have been 18 final PMTSAs adopted by the council, and that's to say that there's 18 of these station areas that have their boundaries finalized, and those have been sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs for approval. Staff have also identified, across the city, 15 PMTSAs and MTSAs that require additional studies to determine the boundaries, and those will be advanced in the next year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just going from the hierarchy. We were discussing provincial policy in terms of the MTSAs and PMTSAs, just going a layer down, discussing municipal policy, and namely in the form of the most important vehicle document that implements the planning policies of the province, and this is the official plan. So the official plan sets out the direction sets out the direction for growth and development across the city. And the official plan has policies on a wide range of issues, you know, on infrastructure, heritage preservation, tree preservation, land uses, built form, among many others. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the official plan does have secondary plans. And what secondary plans are is another layer in the official plan that sets out very, very specific policies for specific geographies across the city. Um, so, for instance, this site is located within Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. This geography is unique onto itself and has its own set of policies that apply, and these policies have been adopted by the province in the form of the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan, and the policies speak on a number of issues: land uses, building forms, height ranges, densities, public realm improvements, and public and community infrastructure, among others. And these policies are categorized differently. Some policies are meant to be applied plan-wise, like across the entire geography. Some are more neighborhood specific. Young Eglinton Secondary Plan has a number of character areas or neighborhoods um, with differing characters and also policies. Um, and I should say also that the secondary plan policies are also, there are some policies that are based on proximity to these major transit stations, future and existing. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, Leaside major transit station area has a minimum density as prescribed by the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. It's 200 residents and jobs per hectare. You can see here the other density targets set for other stations in Young Eglinton. For instance, Mount Pleasant State Transit Station requires 350 residents and jobs per hectare. So this is a snapshot of the expectations that the province has set out for these station areas in the Young Eglinton area. Next slide, please. So just to get into a little bit more detail about the official plan, a key part of how the official plan manages and directs growth and development is by categorizing land in the city by how it can be used. So these categories are known as land use designations, and these send out general uses and building forms and structures. So this site at 1837 to 1845 Bayview is within the mixed use areas designation. Next slide, please. And what the mixed use areas designation does is it permits a wide range and variety of uses, including residential and commercial, among many others. Um, the official plan expects a balance of these uses. Um, the official plan also says that there's expectation that most of the retail and office and a significant proportion of how new housing will be absorbed in these areas. Um, in the mixed-use areas, the scale and density of buildings will vary based on the neighborhood, based on area context, and also any new buildings that do come within the mixed-use areas are expected to frame the streets and also minimize impacts on neighboring properties and lands, especially lower scale areas. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned before, the official plan policies they give pretty comprehensive direction for how growth and development is done in the city. These urban design guidelines, provide even more finer grain, detailed guidance on how to implement these policies. And for this particular application that we have before us, the guidelines with the most relevance are these four: the tall building guidelines, the growing up guidelines, pet friendly design guidelines, and the complete street guidelines. Next slide, please. And then moving down another level in the planning policy framework hierarchy that I mentioned before, we have zoning. And zoning really is meant to give a finer grain detail to official plan policies. So zoning gets into what uses you can have, the maximum height for this particular site, composed of 5 lots. The maximum height is 8.5 meters. The permitted use right now is dwelling unit within a detached house. That's the only permitted use and building form. Zoning bylaw also gets into other standards such as setbacks, uh, number of parking spaces required, things of that nature. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the site details and the site context and the surrounding area. So this site, as I'm sure many of you are aware, fronts onto the south side of Broadway Avenue and is on the east side of Bayview Avenue, so right at the southeast corner. And the current uses are 5 detached houses on separate lots. Next slide, please. In the immediate area surrounding the site to the north, we do have the St. Augustine of Canterbury Anglican Church. And on the same property and grounds, we have the Children's Garden Nursery School, and also further to the north, on the west and east side of Bessborough and other streets, we have detached housing along those streets. To the east, along Bessborough and other streets, we have detached houses. Next slide, please. To the south, we have a 5-story rental apartment building with quite a steep slope. We also have detached houses on Bessborough and other streets to the south. To the west, there is a 2-story commercial retail building, which has a Whole Foods and Shoppers Drug Mart on the northwest corner of Bayview and Broadway. Also, on the southwest corner, an Esso gas station, and a little further south, we have a mixture of single and semi-detached houses um, along the side street, and also a 7.5-story mixed-use building further south on the west side of Bayview. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show some Google Street views of the site. So this is looking east from Bayview towards the site. Next slide, please. And this is a street view of the site looking south from Broadway. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to go over some key facts of the proposal. I know that the applicant's team will get into a bit more detail of the particulars of the proposal. But so for this building, we have the building is proposed to be 25 stories high. 288 dwelling units are proposed, and the bedroom unit mix is outlined as just under 15% of total bedroom. Sorry, I should say 15% of total dwelling units will be 2 bedrooms, and just under 10% of the total dwelling units will be 3 bedrooms. Next slide, please. The total gross floor area will be a little over 18,000 square meters, with 256 square meters of that total on the ground floor, dedicated towards commercial retail. The total gross floor area represents about 8.7 times the area of the site, the land area. Also proposed are 91 car parking spaces and 306 bicycle parking spaces. Next slide, please. This is a plan view or a bird's eye view of the site. So you can see here the tower rising to 25 stories, sitting on a base building or a podium, and the podium does step back or recede, uh, going west away from the east property line. Next slide, please. So this proposal, what are the reasons for the application? So this proposal requires a planning application because it seeks to introduce commercial retail units, or sorry, commercial and retail uses to the site, as well as multiple dwelling units within a tall building type. There are also a number of other zoning bylaw standards that it doesn't meet, such as max building height, which is 8.5 meters. The proposal seeks height allowance of 83.5 meters, as well as minimum parking currently being 326 parking spaces, whereas the proposal is seeking to provide 184 parking spaces. There are other zoning bylaw standards that the proposal doesn't meet, but these will need to be determined thoroughly through the course of the review of the application. Next slide, please. So the issues to be addressed in the February 2022 preliminary report, city staff did identify a number of issues that had to be looked at in the course of the review of the application. And a couple of these issues include the following. So the overall fit and the transition of the building with existing and planned buildings. That's to say existing buildings and also buildings that have already been approved or have already been zoned to build to a certain height and density. The proposed building is also meant. We're also looking at the fit and transition of the building towards the public realm, and also to nearby institutional uses such as such as the Anglican Church, and also higher order transportation facilities, which is which means the Leaside Transit Station. Another issue is the adequacy of the setbacks. That is the distance from the property lines to the lower levels of the building. We're also looking at the adequacy of the actual tower, um, looking at the step backs from the tower. Step backs of the tower from the base building. We are also looking at tower separation from the property lines beside neighborhood designated lands. That is to say, lands that have single family houses, more low rise residential types. And another issue is the quality of public realm and retail character along Bayview Avenue, as improved and interfaced by the proposed development. So we're looking to see what does this proposal bring to the Bayview streetscape, to the Broadway Avenue streetscape, and what does it do for the retail character that has been planned for in the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. Next slide, please. So some next steps for this application. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the applicant has appealed the application to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT. The OLT has received the appeal and is in the midst of scheduling dates for appeal proceedings related to this file. And a request for direction report will be prepared by city staff, and is expected to go to North York Community Council on June 28th, and City Council on July 19th and the 20th. And the purpose of this report is to bring recommendations on the city's position and seek City Council's direction for attending any proceedings at the OLT and representing what their position is on this particular application. And with that, this concludes the city's presentation. I will be handing the mic over, so to speak, to the applicant.
Could I speak? I think I was supposed to speak before.
Yes, I'm sorry, Councillor, yes.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Councillor Jay Robinson, and I'm featuring today the Toronto flag. A lot of people don't recognize the Toronto flag, but this is it. It's a lovely flag. So I just want to, first of all, congratulate you on showing up this evening. We have over 140 participants, so that's a really good showing from the community. And I think it speaks volumes about the level of concern in the neighborhood. So we know the application, we've heard in great detail from the planner all about it. And I do encourage you to reach out to Jason with your questions and comments following tonight. Please speak up tonight as well, but make sure when you email the planners that you CC my office so that we are aware that you're engaged and involved in this process. And it's very important to speak up, not just tonight, but also in writing. And when you speak tonight, feel free not just to, go into the chat box, get on the speakers list and speak out. We want to hear from the residents this evening in Leaside. So I've heard a lot from the residents in Leaside. I've had hundreds of emails on this application. People are very concerned about it, particularly about the context of the site and it not being appropriate. Number one issue for sure is the height. 25-story tower. This is what's being proposed, and this is very concerning, I think, to all of us involved. There's a number of policies in OPA 405 that indicate that this site should be at the most a mid-rise and keep in the character of the area. That is very important. If you look at context, and we talked a little bit about that earlier, Sunnybrook Plaza, a major intersection at Bayview and Eglinton, that was approved at 16 stories. That's called a transit node, and we again heard about that just a few minutes ago. This is not. This is north of that area, and this is being proposed as a very like a skyscraper, a very high building. And I think I'm not going to speak for the planners because it's not my we're church and state, the politicians and the planners, but this is not good planning in the city of Toronto. It makes no sense to propose higher towers than that are on the outer limits of the focus area that that we're seeing. So I think it's very important to say very clearly to everybody involved, this is not Yonge and Eglinton. This is not Midtown. This is Leaside. So what's happening there is one thing, but this is truly Leaside, and we don't want a precedent-setting case here. We don't want a dominating presence, and again, there is zero transition into the abutting neighborhood. So this tower, if it was approved, it would literally be in the backyards of the residents who live on Bessborough Drive. So very concerning. Also, Sunnybrook shares our concerns, a renowned hospital in our ward, in our neighborhood that serves many of us. And this is a problem for their flight paths. So that consultation will continue with Sunnybrook through the planning staff. Also, I don't have to tell you, Bayview Avenue, because we're all on it all the time, is already a parking lot. There's very serious traffic conditions on Bayview and throughout Leaside. Leaside suffers from traffic infiltration, and Leaside suffers from a lot of traffic issues. Just the way it was framed up, it's just too bad that that's the case. But we're working on those traffic issues, and we don't need more problems on the traffic front. So the other thing I always like to talk about at City Council is infrastructure. Whether you're talking about parks, green infrastructure, community centers, schools, all of these and more, even our water pipes are being pushed to the limits of their capacity. And I don't have to tell parents that are on tonight or the school trustee who is also here, and she's going to be speaking later, that we are at capacity at almost every school in Midtown and Leaside and Davisville Village, either at capacity or we're over capacity. So Rachel's going to speak about that after the developer speaks and presents their application. We heard a little bit about the OLT tonight, the Ontario Land Tribunal. And so I guess I'm a bit disheartened, I have to say, that the developer has already circumvented the city's development review process and gone directly to the provincial appeal body. I feel like this sends a message that they're totally disregarding the needs of the neighborhood and the opinions and the concerns and the impacts. So when that happens, I find it very disappointing. Lastly, I just want to again encourage you to please make your voices heard tonight. And we have to make sure there's enough time because we're already at 7:09. And I've asked the planners to ensure there's enough time for your voices to be heard tonight. But please write in. Please speak up tonight, and let's stay engaged on this issue and work together as this process unfolds. So thank you everyone for your attendance, and I'll sign off and throw it back to Jason.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks. I just wanted to note that I've been told that we have the trustee for this particular area. I'm not sure if the trustee is
Yeah,
on the call right
she's
now.
here. If Jason, if we could hear from the developer, and then Rachel, if she could speak first after the
Sure.
developer. Yeah.
Sure, that makes sense. Mario, did you want to begin the presentation?
No, I think what we'll do is throw it over to Michael and to Mansour to run through the presentation, so that we can get to the Q&As as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Michael Goldberg, everybody. I'm a planning consultant representing the applicant in this case. If you could turn the page, please. This is an existing context. It's an air photo. And this is an area I will just set up that there is a lot of lower rise, some mid rise. There are some approvals for some taller buildings at the corner, but since those approvals, there has been planning approvals that have set a framework to consider applications in this area. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Turn the page, please. This is just a close-up of the immediate context. I think Jason has gone through that. You've got the commercial use at the northwest corner, the church and daycare, the northeast corner, the gas station at the southwest corner, and the existing context are these 5 homes. But in a moment, you'll see what the planned context is. Please turn the page, please. So this reflects the few amount of approvals that have taken place. In brown, you have some proposed buildings, and I suspect over time there'll be some more applications as landowners and applicants assemble lands to try to implement the provisions of the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan, or what's otherwise known as OPA 405. Next, please. So this is a schedule from OPA 405, and what it's basically telling you is that when this was before City Council, it used to be neighborhoods, the subject site, and Council had redesignated it to mixed-use area as part of its approval of OPA 405. Next, please. These are a series of maps. Jason didn't get into this to any great extent, but the subject site, it's shown in the dot on the left-hand side. It's shown as a dot on the sort of the top right-hand side of that page in the Bayview focus area. That's the character area within which we're located. And the plan is very clear that within the Bayview focus area, the range of heights that are permitted are 20 to 35 stories within this area. I'll just comment that we are at 25 stories, and therefore we're at the lower end of the range of what's permitted within the Bayview focus area. On the right-hand side of the page are the transit station areas, and the site is about 250 meters from the intersection of Eglinton and Bayview, making it a very, very close proximity or walkable distance to the subway station or the LRT station, which is due to be opening at this point, I believe, in 2024. Next page, please. We have a flight path or aviation report relating to Sunnybrook Hospital, and we just wanted to ensure that that the conclusions are that this proposal does not impinge on the flight paths of any hospital within the City of Toronto, including Sunnybrook. Next page, please. Now I'm going to pass this over to Mansoor Kazerouni, the architect for the project, and he can go through some of the details. Go ahead, Mansoor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mansoor Kazerouni. I'm a principal at IBI Group Architects, and we are the architects for the project. Can we go to the next slide, please? I will give you a brief description of the project and keep it brief so we can have ample time for comments. The proposal before you is a 25-story building, 288 units, which have the ability to be combined, frankly, if we wanted to calibrate the mix of units and create 256 units. We are meeting the indoor and outdoor amenity spaces. space requirements at 2 square meters a unit. We're actually exceeding it. In terms of car parking, we are actually providing 91 cars, including 2 car share spaces and 18 electric vehicle charging spots. As you've already heard, there's 2,700 square feet of retail and 306 bike parking spaces, including 30 short-term. Next slide, please. What's before you is the ground floor, which shows the retail area in pink at the northwest corner of the subject building. And in yellow is the area that is the lobby. The lobby entrance into the project is at the southwest corner off of Bayview. There is a vehicular entrance at the northeast corner through a paved driveway that brings you into the site, where we have 3 short-term parking spaces for deliveries and such. We have an enclosed loading area and access to the underground parking with 91 cars. And immediately south of there, accessed off the yellow kind of lobby area, is indoor amenity space that opens out onto an outdoor amenity space landscaped area on the south side of the building. There is a landscape buffer zone between the driveway and the east property line, which is treed and planted. And there is short-term bike parking space shown at the northeast corner, just adjacent to the driveway access. As you know already, Broadway has a very deep kind of frontage to the property line. It's about 60 feet. So the building is set back about 60 feet from the curb at Broadway. And there is a 6.3 meter sidewalk on Bayview that facilitates tree planting, etc. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is just a mezzanine space that has some additional indoor amenity space. Next slide. And then we get into the tower floor plates. The building on the east, it starts as a C shape at the lower levels, 4 stories, and then the next slide shows it stepping back twice, 4 to 6 to 8. Can we go to the next slide, please? And which you see here, you see the 4 stories that steps back to 6. And then the gray paved area is the roof of the 8-story component. The plan that you're seeing is the 9th floor, which has the indoor amenity spaces for the project, surrounded by an outdoor amenity terrace. And above this, the next slide, we begin with a typical floor plate, which has an average setback of about 18.3 meters from the east property line. And the other setbacks are noted here. I've spoken to the mix. It is a small floor plate. It is 665 square meters of GCA. As a reference, the kind of standard recommended in the tall building guidelines is 750, and this is well below that. Next slide, please. And that's a roof plan showing kind of an aerial view of the development with the stepping that occurs on the east side from 4 to 6 to 8 stories, similar transition on the south side, and then the tower sort of on the north side of the overall composition. So green roofs where we don't have mechanical or outdoor amenity space. There's about 450 square meters of green roof. And of course, all of the non kind of driveway areas are fully landscaped and planted, including the streetscape on Bayview and the 60 feet in front of the site on Broadway. Next slide. We can skip through this. There's 3 levels of below grade parking, as I've already highlighted. There's 91 cars. Some of the bike parking occurs also below grade, which has elevator and stair access. Next slide. And that's just a kind of a landscape roof plan, which we don't need to get into detail right now. Next slide, please. Just a couple of renditions of the project as seen from Bayview. At the lower level, we are proposing a warm colored brick tone delineating the lower 6 floors of the building, starting with the 4-story element that fronts onto Bayview. You're looking at the lobby entrance at the southwest corner. And then the church is in the background. And then at the 5th floor, there's a step back where we have a further 2-story brick-clad element, and then a further step back at the 6th floor, where we go up to the 8-story podium. We get the amenity reveal with the terraces, and then the building, the tower form above it. Next slide, please. That's an overall view of the building as seen from Bayview looking north with the tower component above, where we transition from more solid materials at the base to a glacier expression at the top with projecting balconies. Next slide, please. These are elevations which we don't need to get into a lot of detail. Happy to clarify any questions regarding the elevations during the Q&A. And I believe the next slide is also elevations. And in the interest of time, I will stop right there.
Thank you very much, Mansur, and Michael. Very succinct presentation, and thanks for covering some of the as we all as residents may be coming to understand. Young Anglican Secondary Plan is quite a comprehensive document, so there are many layers to it. So thank you for that. Paul, did you want to bring back up our presentation, the city's presentation? We have some instructions.
Yep. Let me pull it up.
We just have instructions for our Q&A town hall. Just bear with us for a second. It's some technical difficulties.
You know what? Can we just go ahead with Rachel Chernos-Lynn, the trustee, the local trustee, and her comments while you're looking for that, because we were running out of time.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we are going to unmute Rachel. Hello, trustee. We've unmuted you. I'm not sure if you can you can hear us.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we
Okay,
can.
perfect.
Thank you
That's
for
great.
coming to the meeting.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you to all the residents who have committed their time this evening and a lot of time looking at this. I know I've heard from many. And I do know that the TDSB did send in a letter to the planning department at the city. So I'm hoping that you received that. Really, our biggest concern is accommodation. As a resident of Leeson, I would say that I'm really concerned about the size of this project and the scope of this project, but in my formal role as TDSB trustee, my biggest concern is that all of the local schools in this area are at capacity or well beyond capacity, and they are projected to be so for decades out. So this building is a big concern to us in terms of being able to, we will not be able, I mean, simply put, we've stated that we will not be able to accommodate students from this building at the local schools. And I think that comes at a cost to communities, because I think walkable local schools are really important to communities. They're really important in Leaside in particular. But I can tell you that right now, Bessborough is at 111% capacity, Morris Cody at 89%, North Lee at 96% capacity, Rolfe at 103% capacity, and Leaside at 121% capacity. By 2026, those numbers start to really go up. And by 2031, which is potentially when this would be built by, I don't really know how long it would take to build this, but I've seen how long it's taken for Sunnybrook Plaza to be to come up. The numbers in 2031 range from 96% at Morris Cody to 164% at Rolfe. Leaside High School would be 133% capacity by then. And North Lee would be at 100% capacity. And all of these schools have really maxed out in terms of portables. So there is no local school that can accommodate kids from this building. And what does that mean? That means more busing. It's a huge cost to us at the TDSB. It's a big cost to taxpayers, but it's also not good for the environment. And when you look at this location, imagine buses going through here. So I have more concerns that will come at a later time as well in terms of site plan approval, because this is a busy intersection. We already have a crossing guard there, but it is a busy, dynamic intersection. So I am concerned about that as well in terms of how that functions for children's safety walking to school, because another thing that we really want is kids to be able to walk to school, roll to school, bike to school, get to school through active travel. And I am really concerned because the catchment area from North Lee extends into west of Bayview. And so I think this will have a significant impact on that as well. So I know there are many residents who we need to hear from tonight, because the impact for them in terms of shadowing and other pieces are huge. But from the Toronto District School Board and from a the public school capacity perspective, this is a massive, massive issue that needs to be dealt with and needs to be raised here on this file. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for your comments. Paul, do we have? Thank you. So we have our Q&A up. So I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague Paul Procopio. He's going to go over sort of the instructions and the housekeeping for our Q&A town hall. Paul?
Thank you, Jason. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So just gonna go over some brief items for the live Q&A. So we want to be brief to allow for everyone's time to speak. Also try to limit the background noise. Switch to audio by phone if your internet connection is not strong. Also very important is to be respectful. The City of Toronto is an inclusive public organization. Racist or other forms of discriminatory, prejudicial, or hateful comments and questions will not be tolerated. So just to facilitate the discussion, there's two ways to basically provide a question or comment. You can use the raise hand function, which is found at the bottom right hand corner of the participant pop-up screen. And you can also basically use this to ask a question or let the presenter know or the panelists know that you would like to ask a question or have a comment. And you could also use the Q&A pop-up chat to provide your question or comment, and we will be documenting the responses and the questions.
Paul, did you just want to say for the raise hand function for those that are calling in, if you want to raise your hand and let us know so we see that you want to ask a question, please dial *3 and that will raise your hand and we'll know that you're looking to ask a question. Thank you.
Thanks for catching that, Jason. And just if you can't hear us, please disconnect your headset, use the computer speakers. You can also call by phone. The number is here on the screen, and you will have to enter the access code, which is 2455-334-9648 and pound, and then you will have to press pound again. Okay. So let's start the Q&A. Jason, should we start with callers first?
Yes, let's start with some callers first. I see we have a hand up from Reverend Megan Jill. Excuse me if I mispronounced your last name. We're gonna unmute you. Please go ahead, Reverend. Hello, Reverend, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good to
Can you hear me?
welcome. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. And as noted, I'm the Reverend Megan Jull. I'm the parish priest at St. Augustine of Canterbury. Our church is located at 1847 Bayview Avenue on the northeast corner of Bayview and Broadway, directly across from the proposal. In addition to more than 100 households on our roster, I also represent a small private school on our site, an additional 20 households, and we have several community groups like Girl Guides and other renters that regularly use our space. As the LRT project continues, we expected and actually even hoped for condo development in the area. A growing neighborhood is good for church and school growth. We anticipated something much more in line with the other low-rise buildings near us. We are very alarmed by this particular proposal. The proposal indicates it will cast our building in shadow from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and even longer in the winter. These are the primary operating hours for the school and for the worshiping community. This will impact our enjoyment of our stained glass windows on our south facade. It will impact natural light available to the school's play yard. It would also impact natural light for our lower hall, which is used by children 6 days of the week. Outdoors, we also have a community garden bed that will suffer for lack of sunshine, and it impedes our future options around adding solar panels to our building. But I also want to speak from a sacred point of view. We are also concerned. Our church was built just after World War II, set high on a hill with a bell tower reaching up to heaven. It is classic church architecture and a neighborhood landmark. These sacred features will be impacted by such a large tower as our immediate neighbor. I was disheartened when I saw my church in the slide photo of it just looked dwarfed by this building. We anticipated something much more like the base building, but without the accompanying tower. We ask that city staff seriously consider limiting the scale and scope of this project and return to a vision of low-rise buildings on this stretch of Bayview. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Reverend. Thanks for those points. I'm not sure if Mansur, if you wanted to speak to some of those comments, particular the stained glass, the impacts on the garden and the nursery school, and perhaps the architecture of the church itself.
I mean, look, there is going to be some shadow impact. As I've said previously, this is a very slender, small floor plate, 665 square meters, north-south orientation. The kind of profile of the shadow traveling north is going to be as slender as possible. It is going to move across very, very quickly. And frankly, given the immediate proximity of the church across the street, I suspect a somewhat lower building might also cast a similar shadow. So those are my only comments. Michael?
Jason, I just might add a few things. I do I do have the shadow study in front of me here, and for everyone that is on the call, I encourage you to take a detailed look at the shadow study. The shadow barely touches the west side of the property in March and September at the west side of the property at 12:18 in the afternoon. There is a shadow at 1 o'clock at 1:18, and then it just touches the very easterly side of the property at 2:18. So as Mansour said, it's a slender profile that moves quickly through the landscape. So I do encourage you to do that. The only other comment I'm going to make about the scale of the building is I encourage everybody also to review Official Plan Amendment 405, which is the approved Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. And once you do that, you'll see that the planning framework for this site and some other sites in the area along the Bayview corridor do not reflect the existing character or the existing scale in the area. They call for 20 to 35 stories. And as I indicated, we are at the lower end of the range of that height range for the Bayview focus area. So that's an approved document, and this application does not require an official plan amendment. Those are my comments, Jason.
Thank you, Michael. Paul, did we want to choose the next caller or
Yes, Jason. I'll so Sharon Slack, I'm going to unmute you. Sharon, are you there?
No, thank you. I don't want to make comments.
Okay. We'll go to the next. I have Angus here. Angus, you're unmuted.
Thank the developer for bringing this project forward. Providing new homes and workplaces is something that's going to give people dignity. Something we really need in this day and age with everything that's been going on in the world. I'm a healthcare worker, and it's so hard to afford this kind of community without this kind of proposal that's being put forward. More places to live and options of different options of a home setup really helps. My preference is to see this building go to 35 stories. This would help unlock the investments that Ontario and Canada have put into the mass transit and healthcare infrastructure in this community, something that the community enjoys and benefits from. So a question for the developer, would you consider increasing the height of this building to 35 stories? Thank you.
Jason, I'll just answer that question, is that the application that has been made has been moderated by the policies of the Official Plan Amendment 405. And we think we have slotted the scale of this building into the appropriate place, given the policies that currently govern this property.
okay? If we can just shift to some virtual questions. I see Wilmar Lever had asked a question earlier in this meeting. Why was the appeal to the OLT made by the applicant? And second, doesn't this hollow out both community consultation opportunities as well as City of Toronto decision-making room / powers? Mario or Michael, did you want to speak to why an appeal was filed and,
Sure.
and any public consultation opportunities going from this point on?
First of all, I'm going to say that the appeal was launched because, you know, we're in an unusual year where not a lot is going to happen between July and next January. And it's a lot of time, and we are trying to bring homes to this community in as expeditious fashion as possible. But what I would say in saying that is simply because an appeal, and I mean this in all sincerity, because an appeal has been launched does not stop the conversation. We would be happy to continue dialogue with the community, where if there's not hard lines being drawn, we'd be happy to have those conversations. But and during an OLT appeal, there's many occasions when, whether it's OLT sponsored mediation or just simple engagement with the stakeholders, it takes place leading to settlements of an OLT hearing. And I can tell you, speaking on behalf of the developer, the representative here being Mario, I think he would like nothing more than that.
Thank you, Michael. And just if I may add exactly what Michael said, that we've availed ourselves of a right to appeal, but that does not preclude us speaking to community planning and to the residents to talk about the proposal and to get input and seek input on it. I myself have reached out to Jason and city planning on numerous occasions to have such dialogue. So happy to engage.
Thanks, Mario, and thanks, Michael. Paul, who do we have next for call-in?
We can go to a caller. Call in user 26. I'm going to unmute you. Hello?
Sorry. Hi, it's Grace. Sorry, the WebEx is talking at me, so I appreciate you giving me the floor. And so thank you very much. And I actually just I had a comment actually, and I wanted to thank the previous commenter. I believe his name was Angus, who said he was very pro-development and he was a healthcare worker. So I wanted to say thank you for your service, and I do hope that folks like you are able to eventually find a home within Leaside. But one of the reasons I'm actually objecting to this proposal is on the grounds that I don't think it's going to meet the mandate to provide not only housing, but also affordable housing for the folks that actually want to call Leaside home. So ostensibly, the height that's being proposed is being done so to accommodate additional people, but what the accommodation that is being made actually is mostly for one-bedroom or smaller apartments. And from the pricing I've seen from comparable developments being developed in Leaside, those 300 to 400 to 500 square foot units, which if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that people are looking for at least some space, are being sold at roughly $1,000 a square foot. And most of those units, maybe that would be a suitable accommodation for Angus temporarily, but certainly not permanently, are purchased by speculators, and they're purchased by investors. And these are people who, according to the Globe and Mail, are secondary homeowners. So what this developer is proposing and what the province is encouraging is for development for people to purchase investment properties. And on that basis alone, I think it's bad planning and bad public policy. If the developer were to consider accommodating their or adjusting their plan to include mostly 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units, I would think that would probably be more favorable, including rental units and affordable housing units. And then I think the proposal will be a lot more sound and would give an opportunity for folks like Angus, who, again, thank you for your service during the pandemic, would have an opportunity to live and grow and remain in Leaside and become an active community member. So those are my submissions, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks for your comments. And I see well, obviously you had a question behind that. Mario, did you want to speak in terms of in terms of those comments. Do you know if there's going to be any affordable housing? Are you open to that aspect? And notwithstanding that the inclusionary zoning policies don't apply here.
As you stated, the inclusionary zoning policies do not apply to this site. We do believe this will be a product that will be welcome in the community. I think Mansour spoke to the fact that although there is a number of one bedrooms, there is the ability to, if there is a demand in the market, to convert those. So there can be convertible units, if you like, to larger units. We are providing the requisite number of 2 and 3 bedrooms in addition to these convertible units. Everybody is acutely aware of the housing costs. Part of that is driven by, land costs, construction costs, but also other costs such as municipal costs, such as development charges and the like as well. So sometimes the units are of a smaller size to make them more affordable as well as initial homes for individuals and newcomers and others. So we look forward to working with the community, and we think it'll be a product that we see this as a product for end users as opposed to speculators.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Paul, can we go to Sandra King?
Yep. So I'm gonna read out Sandra's question.
No, she raised her hand as well, so
Okay.
please unmute her.
Sandra, you're unmuted.
Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for taking my question. Apologies if I may have missed it, but I just wanted to inquire about the parking entrance into the building and exit. My understanding from looking at the graphics is it looks like it comes out onto Broadway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so I just want to voice my concern with the traffic in the area, which previous traffic studies have already done. Did you take that into consideration? And if so, how are you going to have 91 cars coming in to that area when there's already significant traffic going east-west along Broadway, since we can't do right-hand turns during the busy rush hours, including school times, to Rachel's earlier point. So can you give some perspective on the cars coming in and out of the building, please?
Tim Arnott perhaps can answer that. He's the transportation consultant on the project from BA Group. Michael, unless you had.
Just before Tim starts, the only thing I'm going to say about the location of the driveway, there's 2 opportunities for this site: to come off of Bayview or to come off of Broadway. And the City of Toronto, when you have a major arterial road and a more subordinate road like Broadway, will always request that the access come off the subordinate road. And that's the principal reason why the access was taken off of Broadway. Go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem, Michael. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Arnott. I'm a principal with BA Consulting Group. We're transportation consultants, and we've been retained by the applicant to conduct a transportation impact study and look at various other things related to mobility, prepare our report and submit that to the City of Toronto staff for their review. That has all been done. So the staff is currently reviewing that report, and we await their comments. But I will say that in conducting that study, there are certain things that we must do, must take into account. And one of them is the potential for future area developments to contribute to additional mobility needs in the area, whether that be walking, cycling, transit, or vehicular. And in this course of this study, there were 9 other developments that we looked at in the immediate area in order to gain a better understanding about what the future circumstances would be. So this one would be the 10th that we took into account in our traffic study. One of the things we did do was we did look at the driveway and the ability for sort of the dynamics of Broadway to accommodate traffic coming into and out of the proposed driveway. One of the things I think that gets perhaps misunderstood is that the 91 parking spaces, I should qualify that by saying there's 71 of them are for the residents, 18 are for the non-residents of the project, so visitors and people picking up and dropping off, etc. And after having done literally thousands of these studies, our firm, we've come to understand the characteristics of developments such as this, and they don't generate a vehicle per unit in the hour. It's actually considerably less than that after all is said and done in terms of understanding what it is that's actually being generated by the development. It works out to be something in the order of about maybe 0.2 trips in the peak direction or less per hour for a unit. And that's a statistic that is well documented and well measured across the city in areas such as this. And it's upon those pieces of data that we've based our traffic study and the conclusions, and that has been submitted to the city for their review. And we did look specifically at the driveway and concluded that there is a dynamic, obviously, with respect to all of the traffic restrictions in the area to deal with historically the infiltration issues that have been identified over the years. And taking those into consideration, as well as the ability for traffic vehicles to enter and exit the site, we've come to the conclusion that the driveway will operate acceptably in an urban context, in an urban context like this, recognizing that Bayview is a very busy street, and Broadway is a collector road in the system of Toronto streets intended to collect traffic such as this and deliver it to arterials as well as to other local streets and destinations.
For your question. I see we have a hand up from Douglas Albright. Doug, we're going to unmute you.
I have
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Doug.
hello.
Go ahead. Yes. Sorry about that. We can hear you.
Thanks, Jason. I have a point with respect to the planning policy framework applicable to this proposal. Just a little bit of context. The version of Official Plan Amendment 405 adopted by the city set out a reasonably rational planning framework for the Midtown area, and it included policies for the subject area. That framework set declining density targets moving from Yonge and Eglinton to Mount Pleasant and Eglinton, and finally to Bayview and Eglinton. It included a policy that the edges of the cores, including the Bayview focus area, would be designed to ensure connectivity and transition in scale and intensity to the surrounding areas. It contained a series of maps showing building types and maximum heights for many properties in the Midtown area, including a maximum height of 6 stories for buildings on the subject property. It indicated that the Bayview focus area would be predominantly characterized by mid-rise buildings, punctuated with tall buildings in proximity to the new transit station, and it included a map showing the subject property falling within the secondary zone of the Leaside Station area, and indicated that within the secondary zone, the intensity of development is to be generally less than the station area core, and development is to generally transition down in height and scale to surrounding buildings. In approving Official Plan Amendment 405, as we've already heard, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing made a host of changes, including deleting the maps setting out maximum building heights within the Midtown area, including the 6-story maximum the city had proposed for the subject property. and it introduced height ranges for the Midtown area, including 20 to 35 stories for the Mount Pleasant Station area and 20 to 35 stories for the Bayview Focus area. All other policies I just mentioned remained in place and were part of the approved amendment. This leaves a confusing situation. The Bayview Focus area, of which the subject site is a part, is to have a target density considerably less than the Mount Pleasant Station, i.e. 200 residents and jobs per hectare, as opposed to 350 residents and jobs per hectare envisaged for Mount Pleasant. But both are subject to the same height range, 20 to 35 stories, which makes no sense. The approved policies indicate the Bayview focus area is to be primarily mid-rise, i.e. to have buildings between 5 and 12 stories, that any such building should transition down to nearby development, and at the same time, the focus area is to be subject to a height range of 20 to 35 stories. Notwithstanding this confusion, when the full suite of approved policies are reviewed in their entirety, the community is of the opinion that the subject property is intended to be a mid-rise site and that the 20 to 35 story range provision only logically applies to development within the Bayview focus area in close proximity to the Leaside station. To conclude otherwise makes little planning sense.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for your detailed analysis of this comment. I don't know, Michael, did you want to maybe respond to just some of Doug's concern about the disconnect?
I'll say that I'll say this, Doug, and I'd be happy to sit down with you and have a conversation with you about this. You and I are going to differ in your conclusion and my conclusion that this is intended for a mid-rise site. When the minister approved OPA 405, there was some 244 modifications. They weren't just to the maps, but to the policies. You know, I think that many of the concepts of transition, many of the concepts of compatibility were introduced as opposed to transition, and the height ranges were put in there. So as a planner in reviewing that, I've got to conclude that along this portion, which includes along this portion of the Bayview focus area, there is a 20 to 35 story range. So we didn't jump to the 35 story. I know one of the speakers earlier would like us to do that, but we actually said we'll stay at the lower end of the range. We are within 250 meters of the transit station. A very walkable distance. So I'm going to agree to disagree with you that this is intended by policy to be a mid-rise site. But you know, I'm not sure that this is the forum really to debate it in much more detail than that. But that is my response, Jason.
Thanks, Michael. So I think we can move to maybe a Q&A question, Paul. Let's go to Phil.
Okay.
So we had a writing question from Phil. It said he said around 2018, a regulation was enacted with respect to protecting helicopter flight paths to St. Mike's Hospital and sick kids. Has any work been done to determine the impact to the Sunnybrook Hospital helipad as impacted by the proposed building? If yes, what was the result? If no, what work will get completed? And is there a concern with respect to the 2 or 3 flight paths used by Orange helicopters to Sunnybrook?
Jason, yeah, I mentioned in our presentation that we have hired an aviation consultant. That report will be made public. The conclusions of that report are that we are amply clear from projecting into any flight path of any hospital within the city of Toronto, including Sunnybrook. We will be filing that application. Or not the application, I'm sorry, the report. We'll be filing that report.
Thank you, Michael. Who do we have next, Paul?
Did you want to do another Q&A question or a caller?
Let's move on to Colin.
Okay. Carlos, I'm going to unmute you. You're unmuted. Yes.
Good evening. Thanks for the presentation. Thank you to everybody. Jason, I must prize the land acknowledgement. I think that is a very good practice. Thank you for doing that. Okay, my name is Carlos Moreno. I'm an architect and a planner that lives in the community. Doug is also very kind, and he's also a planner that has been helping the community in all this process. I think that is important to say that the community, in terms of the Leaside community, is pro-development. We have been working for several years in various creating partnerships with various architects, city officials, politicians, and others, creating and working on the development that is around the community. Is perhaps, just to put it into context, is perhaps one of the most neighborhood communities that are under pressure due to the LRT. So we do all understand that, and we are through development. And it is important to say that perhaps slide 27 that Jason was presenting is what is going to show the conflict that we are encountering, and is the conflict between the official plan and the provincial and the provincial policy. It's not that anybody is wrong. It's not that anybody is in conflict in terms of the policies they are following. It's just that we are following policies that are more convenient for the side that we are representing. So based on that, I think that as a professional, I think that what this development is proposing is concerning in the sense not only for the site, we are very focused about the site, but in the future of the development as a city is what in my mind and in many of our communities is concerning, and is about the precedent that this type of development is going to assign to future developments. Historically, to put it into context, this type of high-rise building is the type of high-rise building that is happening around the 401. It didn't even happen along the station of the Shepherd subway line. It is happening, perhaps in terms of comparison, very similar to a couple of developments about Yonge and Eglinton, but it's definitely perhaps not even in compare to the type of development that is happening around the 401. So what I'm trying to say here is that this type of development, even within our community, is happening in more suitable sites that are the boundary between land uses. But this is in the middle of neighborhoods that are a single family units. We do know that we have responsibility to increase the density, and we want to take advantage, for instance, of the mid-rise buildings that are required within the city, the missing middle garden suites that are going to help us accomplish other type of densities. So what is very concerning here is that history has told us that if we look at anywhere between Yon and Mount Pleasant, the current urban fabric of it has been wiped out by developments that started this way. We are concerned about what this is going to propose in terms of future development between Bayview to Braincliff, in which close to Eglinton is going to wipe out all the current urban fabric. That does not allow to build good cities. And that is one of the main concerns that we have is not to have developments that allows the transition, not to have developments that allow the recognition of various layers of how city grows and how communities developed. And in terms of planning, we need to figure out what is the best way to build good cities. I'm very happy to hear, for instance, the comments from Mario that he is willing to work with the community. At least I hope that is what I understood, because we want to continue and we welcome the partnership to create good development. In terms of architecture, I do believe that I agree with some comments that were heard. I think they are echoing the comments from the city. It's about what the building brings to the community. I think that if we were to we talk about building heights, but I think that many other areas in terms of guidelines, in terms of high rise have been ignored. If they were implemented, like for instance, the stepping of the building, this building will not ever be more than 12 stories. And it's because the stepping has not been even implemented. So it doesn't allow for any good transition between high rise, mid rise, and the current density or building forms in the area is just simply being imposed. And I just want to finalize with one area, and it is about what we are calling about affordability. We need to understand, and the public and all of us needs to understand what affordability means. For most developers, which is also part of my developers are my clients, for most developers, affordability means the average or prices below the average of the income of the area. That in lease side is not real affordability. When, according to the city, our mid-average income is about 250, that is not going to help anybody in terms of providing affordable housing. I hope that we can provide really affordable housing and really address issues that the city as a whole and as a society will require, in that it should be below the average income of the entire city. So we really have or use this building to provide the diversity that the neighborhood needs.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you. Michael and Mansour, did you want to speak to one point that Carlos had made about in terms of transition, especially to the neighbor to the east, and what your rationale was in terms of how you've stepped back the building?
Answer, do you want me to answer, or are you going to answer that?
I mean, I can. I briefly touched on it in the presentation, and in the interest of time, I didn't dwell on it. But we have stepped the building from the east to the, as you recall, I described a C-shaped base to the building. We have created the transition starting with a 4-story element that steps up to 6 and then steps up to 8. We've created a reveal floor over there where the amenities exist, and then allowed the 660 square meter tower form to rise above that. And thank you, Jason, for sharing that. Similarly, we've done that on the south side, where we've stepped down from 8 to 4. And I also described in the visuals that I showed the 4-story predominant street wall, then a step back to 6 stories, then the 8, and then the tower above. So we've actually done a stepping back of the form from all kind of sides, all frontages. And further, we've created contrast through the use of materials to highlight that kind of distinction between the base building and the building above. So certainly we believe that we have applied the principles of transition within the site and kind of responded to some of the principles that were outlined.
Thank you, Mansoor.
We also have Mark Sterling on the line if you want. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. He's our urban designer.
No, I don't have anything more to add to what Mansoor has said. The step backs are there, and you can see them on this plan.
Thanks, Mark.
So in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next call-in. John McDonald, you're unmuted.
Jason, Paul?
Yeah, it's Paul.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So my name is John McDonald. My family and I have lived in North Leaside for over 20 years. I was surprised to see the proposed Bayview Broadway development, so I wanted to provide my feedback. I support intensification and development. We want to welcome new development and new families in the area. However, because the structures are permanent, good planning and development must have greater vision and goals and development criteria in order to develop sustainable communities. Specifically for the Bayview focus area, it will be characterized by a predominance of mid-rise buildings, with a limited number of tall buildings framing the core transit station, located at the intersection of Bayview and Eglinton. And good planning incorporates built form principles. That aim is to provide a range of heights to reinforce the existing neighborhood character, which is mentioned predominantly low-rise, residential, with modest mid-rise developments, to promote a localized sense of place and create a legible skyline for the midtown that reinforces the structure when viewed from the key vantage points within the broader city. One built form principle is to maintain and reinforce the stability of low-rise neighborhoods through the use of varying approaches to transition and scale suitable to the local context and minimize shadow and privacy impacts. As currently proposed, the Bayview Broadway development does not address and is in violation of all of the above vision principles and built form considerations. That list is long, so for the sake of time, let's only consider a couple. First, setbacks. That setbacks will be compatible with the building line of other adjacent properties and on both sides of the street. The development fronting on major streets in the Midtown core, such as Bayview, will contribute to creating a consistent and continuous street wall in the respective character area. The setbacks in the proposed development are inadequate and not compatible with the building line of the adjacent apartment property to the south, and does not create a consistent and continuous street wall in the respective character area. There is also not an appropriate setback considered for Broadway, an important and extremely busy east-west corridor for pedestrian traffic, bikes, and cars. The inadequacy and the lack of setbacks for both Bayview and Broadway is a clear indication that the developer is trying to force too much on a relatively small parcel of land. Secondly, we've mentioned transitions. The stated goal and planning principle consideration for transitions is to reinforce the stability of low-rise neighborhoods, and to ensure that development transitions in scale suitable to the local context, and that developments minimize shadow and privacy impacts. To the north, to the south, the east, and the west, Proposed development is surrounded by low-rise, residential, apartment, and commercial development. These low-rise structures clearly establish the existing character and local context. Starting from the LRT station and transit core node at Bayview and Eglinton, there are 250 and 500 meter bands that reflect the decreasing height and density of development moving away from the station. So the tallest buildings are located in the intersections next to the stations. Then as you move away from the station, building heights and densities decrease with the goal of transitioning into the local context and community. The proposed development is not only well away from the station, but it's also, I looked at it, it was 250 meters outside of the band. That might be appropriate for a tall building near the station. Any development in this location should be well on its way to transitioning into the local residential and low-rise context. At 25 stories, not only does the proposed development not even come close to attempting to transition to the local context, but by being taller than even the approved developments at the core station area at Sunnybrook Plaza, surprisingly, the proposed development transitions upwards instead of downwards from the core node. An additional consideration for transitions is also topography of the proposed development site. With the proposed development being located at the top of the hill, it will have significant prominence in the community. Depending on your location in the community, this could perceptibly add 2 to 5 stories to the height of the building, further distorting the transitions in every direction. The placement of the development at the top of the hill is a key consideration when evaluating the suitability of the proposed development in consideration of transition, context, and built form principles. Other good planning principles and considerations to help a development transition into the local community include stepbacks and angular planes, ideally something in the range of 45 degrees. These design considerations help buildings to transition into the local context, which is again low-rise residential. At a height of 25 stories and being located on such a small footprint, those modest lower level stepbacks, along with the extreme height of the proposed development, are so inadequate, the proposed stepbacks could be considered to almost have been completely ignored.
Thank you, John. I think in the interest of time, we're just going to see if the applicant has any comments towards your points.
Paul, if we could, I do see a number of callers. If we can move to the next
Another caller,
please. Yes, please.
Doug?
Sorry, just to interrupt. Just for the interest of time, people, we can definitely go a little bit over, just because there is definitely there's been a lot of questions, concerns, and comments about this application, and I do note over 150 attendees. So if we could all, if each caller could try to be succinct and raise maybe no more than two points or questions, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Doug, I just unmuted you.
Thank you very much. I thank Jay for enumerating a number of our concerns in the community. My question is very simple. At the southwest corner, I think it's of Bayview and Parkhurst, there's a brand new building. It's called Blue Note, I believe. I just wondered why a building like that, in your view, Michael, would be inappropriate for that site, because it would certainly deal with issues about the schools and crowding the subway and all the other. I think the community would support something like that. But so why would the Blue Note building be inappropriate for this site in your view?
Okay. I'm not familiar with the building, but I'll try and answer your question the best I can. The Bayview focus area focuses only on Bayview and a little bit on Eglinton. It does not penetrate into the neighborhoods. This site was redesignated from neighborhoods to mixed use area, and increasingly the focus of the intensification is not only near the station, but it's going up the arterial or major street corridors, not internal to the neighborhood. So there's an issue of the concept of tolerance for height along these major corridors where they are in proximity to the station. So one of the earlier callers said this site is quite far away from the station, and I'm going to beg to differ. A major transit station area is defined by the growth plan to be within 500 and 800 meters from a major transit station, the LRT station in this case. We are 250 meters from that. So we are very close. We did not go to 35 stories, which is permitted by the Bayview focus area. We transitioned down. And quite frankly, I don't think along Bayview, there may be some other redevelopment sites, possibly the 5-story apartment to the south may or may not come up for development. I do not expect a lot of intensification on the Esso station. I do not expect a lot of intensification on the Whole Foods site simply because of the vintage and investment, the recent investment that's gone into that site. So this is an opportunity site in accordance with the policies. And that's, I guess what I would say to you folks is your beef is with the policies that are in place in the, provincially, I'm going to recognize it was provincial modifications that created this height regime, not the council version, but it is the version of the City of Toronto official plan that is now in force and effect.
Thank you, Michael. So we're going to move on to another call-in. Sandra, I unmuted you. Sandra, are you there? We're going to move on. I don't think Sandra was there.
Let's try Sandra in after the next caller.
Yep. Janice, I unmuted you.
I'd like to refer back to something that was said when we talked about the unit distribution in the building. I heard someone say that the unit distribution would be changed according to what unit size was selling. And I don't really think that should be the case. I think that somewhere, I'm not in that well, anyway, somewhere it says that 2 and 3 bedroom units should make up 40% of the units in this building. Therefore, as much as you're advertising this building is going to be 288 units, it should be the 256 flex units that you have in your flex unit mix. And that brings the number of studios way down, which is more reasonable. Furthermore, I do believe that $1,000 a square foot is way under what these are going to be priced at. I think you're looking more at $1,200 a square foot, making them unaffordable for most. I also agree that they'll be for investors and we'll have tenants in the studios. Not that that's not needed, but I think what Leaside wants is 2 and 3 bedroom units. So I'd like to change tack and recognize Councillor Robinson, because when she said this is Leaside, not Yonge and Eglinton, I said hurrah, because that's the feeling I got when I read through your application documents. I've lived here 25 years around the corner from the development. Never once have I thought that North Toronto Community Centre or Cody Community Centre are my community centers. Nor do I go to the Orchard View Library or the Mount Pleasant Library. We have a library in Leaside. I feel like really we need recognition that this building is becoming part of the Leaside neighborhood, despite the fact it's in your Bayview and Focus area. And reading your community services and facilities report, you have a great Schedule A that shows where all the services and facilities are, and it clearly shows that in Leaside, we are short of a few. We really don't have a YMCA. We don't have a Leaside Community Center. We have the old East York Community Center way across the Bayview Bridge, not really within walking distance. So I think a point should be made that if there's any benefit, cash in lieu of parkland or whatever that comes from the development of this building, we need to ensure that it comes in to benefit the Leaside neighborhood and not the Yonge and Eglinton, because this building and these residents are joining our Leaside community.
Thank you, Janice. So we're going to move on to the next caller. Sandra, I wanted to try to unmute you again just to see if you were there.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you. Did you have a question?
Yes, I had a question. For Tim Arnott. I live near Bayview and Broadway, and I walk through there regularly. And it's often dangerous to cross at peak hours, to cross Broadway, because people don't stop at the stop signs, and there's gridlock because people don't trust people to take turns at the four-way stops. It's a disaster. And I appreciate the difference between, having a driveway out onto Bayview versus onto Broadway. But there's also the little kids, and the stretch of that block is quite short. So, and you're not going to get 0.2 cars per hour throughout the day. It's going to be higher at the peak hours when traffic is just a total disaster at that intersection. And so I still don't think that having the driveway come out at Bayview or at Broadway is a safe or workable solution to the project. It's a total dangerous disaster now, and with people trying to get out onto Broadway, it will only get worse. So that wasn't really a question. It was just my rant, because it's awful. I've almost been killed trying to cross the street there, and I'm a grown-up, never mind a kid.
Thank you, Sandra.
Mansoor, if I can just jump in, and I have done a site visit. Thank you, Sandra, for that comment. Noting especially the sidewalk along Bayview is not the best condition, and I'm just curious, Mansoor, what improvements, if any, will be made as part of this proposal to make that more safe, more conducive to retail character along Bayview.
Jason, we have made provisions to facilitate a 6-meter sidewalk that has been implemented in many parts of the city. Most developments we're doing where we are required to widen sidewalks, we're being asked to provide up to 6 meters. In our experience, that facilitates a row of tree planting. It facilitates a safe pedestrian zone within that. I believe the city standard for that is 2 meters or 2.1 meters. So we have and then some more. So certainly from our perspective, we believe that we have created a pedestrian zone and a sidewalk zone that is consistent with many developments that we're doing in the city, that the city has kind of accepted, frankly.
Thank you, Mansoor.
We're going to move on to the next caller. Doug Willock, I unmuted you. Doug, are you there?
Yeah, I've already spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Jita, you're unmuted. Yep, we hear you.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I realized was unmuted, but no one introduced me. My name is Geeta Thomas. I also wanted to talk about the traffic. So I've been living in Leaside for the last 13 years and live actually at Broadway and Bessborough. My concern is about the the impact to the traffic that I see every day in North Leaside. And I've actually reached out to Councillor Robinson's office many times and want to say thank you to you, Councillor, and to your team for your support. Over the last decade, I've seen a significant increase in the number of cars passing through North Leaside. A few years ago, the North Leaside Traffic Committee was formed, worked with the city to conduct traffic studies, and found a 329% increase in traffic in North Leaside since 1996. They believe at that point in time, there were about 1,700 cars in North Leaside from residents, but about 10,000 cars a day was traveling through the neighborhood to get to other destinations. This was a few years ago, but I believe the numbers are even worse now. And in fact, I think the city agrees because they're working on the development of a neighborhood transportation plan because of the increase in traffic concerns. I know Broadway is considered a collector road. And Tim, I know you're doing the traffic studies, but due to the traffic it's receiving, at that point in time, the committee thought it was actually could be considered a minor arterial road like Bayview and Eglinton, just by the sheer traffic numbers. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is if this condominium with 25 stories, 288 units, and 91 parking spots approved, what's going to be the impact on traffic? And as a parent of young kids, this scares the bejesus out of me. There'll be a number of times where I've seen cars stopping in the middle of the crosswalk at Broadway and Bessborough, children, parents with strollers, people with mobility issues, clients of CNIB who's right around the corner who are vision impaired are having to walk through cars to cross the road. And it's dangerous. And every member of my family has had at least one near miss because a car was rushing to cross Broadway and Bayview. Broadway and Bessborough, actually. And just this afternoon, just today, I went to pick up my 10-year-old and 6-year-old from the school bus stop, and we crossed Broadway. And even though I make sure I always look carefully to ensure all cars stopped, as we stepped out onto the intersection, a car going eastbound on Broadway started to move, and I had to frantically wave at them to catch their attention before they came too close to us. So the idea of having a driveway on Broadway for this condo less than 50 meters from Bayview leads to me to believe that there's going to just be more congestion on the street, more aggressive driving, and we have enough. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking my kid to the dentist on Broadway, going to Bayview. A car jumped onto the sidewalk on the church, to turn right to go north on Bayview. And I should add, this right turn was illegal because there were no right turns allowed during that time frame of 4 to 6 p.m. But that driver was impatient. So, and speaking of driveways, the traffic committee from a few years ago said 50 homes had their driveways blocked due to transient cars. I can tell you my home is one of them, and many other homes on Bessborough are too. Last Friday, I took a photo at 6 p.m. There were 13 cars waiting on Bessborough to get to Broadway or Glenvale. So if this condo is built, 91 spots I don't think is going to be near enough for the units that you have, plus also visitors, plus also guests. It's probably going to be likely that 300 spots is going to be needed. And if that's not being provided, where are they going to park? Likely on Broadway, Bessborough, Ansley, Glenvale, and other neighboring streets, only adding more congestion, poorer visibility to pedestrians, and more blocked driveways. Finally, as a healthcare worker myself, I would be remiss to mention that I believe the additional traffic congestion will negatively impact residents who need to get to Sunnybrook, who need to get to an ER quickly, or delay the EMS who are trying to reach one of these neighbors' house. So all in all, I understand the cities need to address housing and increase density, but I hope keeping our streets, our children, and our residents safe is a top priority when you consider this condos proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you for those two comments. I will say that we do have staff from Transportation Services listening in, so we have noted your comments, and I think we can look a little bit further into traffic calming control conditions, because we've heard that from you and other residents that it's a huge issue. So, and I'm sure the councillor has thoughts on that too. So. Paul, can we move to the? I think
Yep.
we can go a little bit over time, but seeing the number of callers.
Yeah, so I'm gonna unmute call-in user 4. You're unmuted. Hello, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay. My name's Mary Puro, and I live in the low-rise building that's just south of the proposed development at 1835 Bayview Avenue. And I'm also a parishioner at St. Augustine of Canterbury. And I have several concerns, but I'll keep it to 2 due to the time constraint. My first comment is that I have a mobility issue. I have to walk with a walker. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in the neighborhood that has to do that. So I think under many fronts, the construction of this building, especially when it's being constructed, is going to be an impediment to people like me. And I just wonder how much that's being taken into consideration. My second comment is a question, actually. What's going to happen to the people the householders that live in those 5 houses that are going to be expropriated? Like, where are they going to go? So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. We're going to move on to the next caller. Jim Parker, you're not muted anymore.
Okay. Our house is one of 4 on Besborough directly behind the proposed development. The condominium will diminish the enjoyment of our home of 40 years. There are 3 mature boundary trees that we share with the developer along our rear lot line. These trees provide a visual buffer between our properties. The developer intends to remove these trees without our agreement. The developer has submitted a wind study that assumed that the land was flat. It did not take into account that the building would be on the top of a hill. Nevertheless, the study shows there would be excessive wind in places around the building that would require remediation. However, the study did not have any test locations on our properties where there would also likely be excessive wind problems. Our houses are already 1 story lower than the proposed condo because Bayview is higher than Besborough. The artist's renderings incorrectly show all the land as being flat and level. The building has been oriented so that the wide side faces us. Also, it has not been designed to stay under the accepted 45-degree plane. When we look out our back windows or sit in our backyard, all we shall see to the west, whether we look up or side to side, will be a big wall 30 feet away. The plans call for a large, noisy ventilation shaft from the garage located right up against the property line, or at least as close as they can get it. In addition, rather than having a quiet backyard behind us, we will now have a driveway for all the cars and trucks going in and out of the building. Also, there will be a pedestrian and parcel pickup and drop-off entrance facing us. This will all add to the noise. For most of the afternoon and evening, our backyard will be in the depressing shadow of the building. This shade will make it hard for us to grow grass, shrubs, and trees, not to mention have a garden. Condo residents will be able to look out their windows or from their balconies and terraces right into our backyard, intruding on our privacy. The walls, barriers, alcoves, and fences at the rear of the condo will provide perfect cover for potential illegal activities behind our houses. Because any parking for the building's retail stores will not be beside the stores, shoppers will likely park on Besborough or other surrounding streets. This already happens when many shoppers going to Whole Foods would rather park on Besborough, actually in front of our house, and walk across the street rather than use the free parking under Whole Foods. We have no nearby public parking. People already park overnight on Besborough. There are even cars parking illegally overnight under Whole Foods. They've had to deal with that. With the lack of proposed parking in the condominium, tenants and visitors who are not able to find a parking spot in the condo will park nearby illegally. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for your comments. We're noting them, and obviously these comments are being recorded, so staff can reference them.
I believe Michael would like to make some clarifications, if possible.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to raise one point about the trees that this speaker just raised. During the design process, we were very cognizant of the trees, not only the trees to the east of the site, but also the trees to the south of the site. And what was done, in addition to doing the arborist report, is the arborist worked in conjunction with the architects. The basement garage and all excavation was moved back from the east lot line and back from the south lot line where the trees are located to respect the tree protection zone, the TPZs, so that there are not trees proposed at all that do not belong to this site that are proposed to be removed. They're all proposed to be preserved. I just wanted to raise that point in the event that the speaker has not read the arborist report.
Thanks, Michael. We have Adam from our Urban Forestry Department. Adam, can you speak on what the policy is for trees that are literally on the lot line shared between two properties? Adam? You might be on mute.
Trees on the boundary. Well, if the plans get approved at council, if a site plan agreement is in place that will require the removal of the trees, then the trees have to be removed. At this point, they're showing plans that the boundary trees are to be protected at this time. Does that help?
Thanks, Adam. Paul, who do we have next for?
I'm going to unmute Simon Tran. Simon?
Issue and we don't have enough housing. I don't think we have enough schools, as you know, we can tell by the overcapacity of the schools we have now. We definitely need more and better transit, and we need more bike lanes. So we really need, there's a lot of things that need to change in this city. And I think if we're gonna, there's too many single family homes that go for 1.5 million to $2 million. And not only that, but they're getting dozens of bids. There's really a big housing supply shortage here, and I think we really need more housing. And I think I'd like to ask the city to please work on developing more transit, building more schools, building more bike lanes. I'm gonna ask the developer, please add affordable housing, because we really need more affordable housing here. And I think if the offset required to get affordable housing in this development is to make it taller, then I say make it taller. If you need to go 35 stories to get any number of affordable housing here, we need more affordable housing. Then make it taller. So anyways, so I'm gonna ask the city and I'm gonna ask for residents to please stop fighting height. Please stop please stop complaining about shadows. Start fighting for affordable housing. And yeah, I guess that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Can Paul, who can we call on next?
Yeah, we can. I'm gonna unmute Geoff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. It's Jeff Cattell. I guess I'm a bit of the cleanup crew here. I've listened to this session tonight. I've listened to over a dozen community consultations in Leaside over the last 3 or 4 years, and this is one of the most residents are the most upset I've ever seen on any of the developments. I would mention that, as was said earlier, Leaside is accommodating a lot of new development, and we welcome the new residents. And I would say that in 95% of the time, we've actually worked cooperatively with the developer. I'm a co-president of the Leaside Residents Association, so I speak as somebody who's been involved in every development over the last 10 years. And I can list the ones on Bayview: 1404, 1466, 1684, 1710, 36. There were 4 development applications there. 2 of them have been approved, and 3 out of 4 of them have involved settlement negotiations. And the reason is that the applicant came in with what was fundamentally, in terms of character, in terms of being mid-rise, they fit the neighborhood. They were according to the OPA 405, and the issues were relatively minor, and we were able to negotiate and get those resolved. And the most recent one, which was the settlement, was recently, only a couple of weeks ago, approved by council, involved a location that's the same distance from Eglinton as this one, the 1710, 1736. It's a mid-rise development, 8 stories, and it works. Obviously we had some issues, but they've been resolved. If you go across Eglinton, you've got the 660, the Tonnybrook Plaza. You've got 815 to 845 at Laird. We're now involved with the Hyde Park development of Brincliffe. In each of these applications, we worked hard with the applicant. We had concerns, but they were able to be resolved. We don't know yet about Hyde Park. That's so new. But I guess, and then again on Laird, we've just come off negotiations on 126 to 132 Laird and 134 Laird. Again, 2 mid-rise developments, 8 stories. There were issues, but they could all get resolved. What you're coming in here today with is a bully application. You've heard of bully beds. This is a bully application. And frankly, Mr. Goldberg, please go back and revise your application, because this is not respecting the neighborhood. As I said, the character on Bayview is mid-rise. And you just look around. And these are recent applications, 4 of them, all mid-rise, and they all will be or have been resolved successfully. This is not a different situation. Just look at it in terms of the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. Paul, who do we have next?
So I'm gonna unmute Robert. Robert Moore, you're unmuted. Robert, are you there? We're gonna try the next call in. Anne? Anne, are you there?
Yeah, we're here. It's Matt Cullingham speaking. So there were a number of callers who raised valid concerns on the traffic congestion and pedestrian danger at Bayview and Broadway, and those are concerns that that we share. And so far, frankly, I found the answers didn't really satisfy the concerns raised. So I'd like to turn the shared concerns into more of a follow-up question for Mr. Arnott and his team. So my question really is that Mr. Arnott, you said a number of studies, but have you yourself been at the corner during morning and afternoon rush hour, and can you back the analysis that your team provided and sincerely say that the residents' concerns are not valid? And I ask this because I do have a hard time believing that a serious study would not have raised red flags for the intersection, even in its current state, let alone with a new 25-story building that really has no comparable buildings in sight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you want to provide a response?
Yes, I have been to the site. It's actually mandatory for anybody in our firm doing work at a particular location to see it and to observe it and to get an understanding about what the site area is. We're very familiar with the area. I've been many projects in the area personally, and our company is also involved in many in the immediate vicinity. I would say that I guess our understanding about how some of these types of projects operate from a transportation perspective, certainly colors our experience and gives us a little bit of comfort that understanding that the nature of particularly vehicular traffic generation from these types of developments isn't as intense as is perceived, generally speaking, by sort of the general public. And that's usually evidenced by the I guess the question that comes from how much traffic is actually going to be generated. And we usually express it on a per unit basis because that's how we generate it sort of mathematically and then convey that to our peers at the city and then discuss those things. The 0.2 per unit number that I gave for a peak direction traffic generation is a peak hour number. That is the peak generation characteristics of sites like this. It does get lower off peak. And we have looked at Bayview and Broadway with that sort of critical eye, taking into consideration the placement of the driveway and weighing, as Michael Goldberg had earlier stated, weighing the options that would be available to this site, regardless of whether it's 25 stories or something different than that. And we are comfortable that the circumstance that we've described is a reasonable one from a sort of broader transportation impact perspective, but also from the site design perspective, it does provide a better circumstance versus having a driveway, for example, off of Bayview.
Okay.
The other thing that
Thank
I would
you,
point
Tim.
out just very quickly
We're just running
is
out of
that
time right now.
okay. Well, the residents. All right.
So, Paul, can we move to the next caller, please?
Yes, we're going to move to Wayne. Wayne, you're unmuted.
I have a brief comment about the context of the building. The applicant's block context plan, figure 1, it shows the highest existing and approved buildings in the area are the 16 and 12-story approved developments at the northeast corner of Bayview and Eglinton. I guess that would be at the former shopping plaza. The subject site should be in keeping with these, in my opinion. Given the additional ground height elevation of the subject site, the appropriate maximum height should be 12 stories. I can't see how you can justify the 25 stories based on projected applications that may or may not come in the future. The ones that are approved are the 16 and 12 story. Another point is the planning group. I'll leave my comments I sent into to Jason on the shadow studies, but in the summary, the planning group states that the outcome of this evaluation is, in our opinion, a well-designed organization of the subject site, which contains an appropriate height and density, et cetera, et cetera. In our opinion, the proposed building is designed to be sensitive to and fits into this context without adverse planning, et cetera, et cetera. This project, as proposed, has none of these qualities, and in my view, should be rejected. What it does is maximize the revenue of the sale of 288 units, mostly studio and 1 bedroom. So I understand why they're doing it. The elephant in the room is really the Ontario government or whoever propose the Young Eglinton basis of maximum 35 stories. That should not be appropriate on the east side of Bayview in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are nearing 9 o'clock, and I'm just cognizant that you know, of everyone's time, and thank you everyone for your patience and your participation for tonight. I'd like to hand the mic over, so to speak, to Councillor Jay Robinson. Councillor, if you wanted to give some closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Jason. And thank you to everyone who participated tonight. It was an incredible session. I would have liked a bit more time for residents to speak. That is the concept of a public meeting. So I hope the Director of Planning will look at that and how we frame up these meetings to maximize the time for residents. There was a lot of amazing comments also in the chat box. If you got that opportunity, and planners, I hope you'll read that, those comments, because they're very important. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being vocal. Thank you for speaking out about your neighborhood. I think it's very important that we call this what it is. And what this is zoned residential detached mixed use in the secondary plan, period. This is not zoned for towers. It's barely zoned for mid-rise. It's currently zoned residential detached mixed use in the secondary plan. So anybody who said otherwise tonight is not being honest. This is 25 stories, no transition to the abutting neighborhood. As somebody aptly said, you know, it sits on the top of Bayview Hill. So it increases the impact and the height on Leaside. And the site is in the corner of Bayview focus area, where the heights are meant to transition down, not up, down. So like I said, at the best, this should be a mid-rise. The traffic is already a very significant problem in Leaside. I hear about it every day, and I've witnessed it on many occasions. So this is going to exasperate the existing traffic issues. The other thing is that we're looking at 289 dwelling units where there are currently 5 single-family dwellings. That says it all. The photo of this site, I can't do that, but this photo, this image says it all. It's wrong. The fact that the applicant has gone to the OLT after just a couple months shows disregard and disrespect to Leaside, and quite frankly, to the city planners. So this is disappointing on every account, and we do not have a supply issue in the city. We have an affordability issue in the city. I'm so tired of that messaging out there. It's not true. That narrative is being spinned by developers. We don't have a supply issue. We have an affordability issue, which is a massive problem. Nothing in my ward is being built now or in the future that's affordable. And I can guarantee this won't be either. I know in the chat box, people are saying, what were the units going to cost? We didn't get that answer tonight, but you can imagine. So I'll wrap up there and say, this is not responsible development, period. And we're not on board, and we're firmly opposed to this as a community, as a neighborhood, and as a city.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for those remarks. And I do apologize on staff's behalf. There were a lot of write-in questions and even some call-in questions that we weren't able to get to, but we have noted your questions, and we will be reaching out to residents and community members who provided their contacts, and try to address their comments and questions after this meeting. So I do want to thank everyone. I want to thank residents, community members, Councillor Robinson and all staff, as well as the applicant's team for making time and out of your busy schedule to attend this meeting. So with that, I want to wish you a good night. Thank you.